If the first part was mostly about the films of Universal Studios, then today there will be more of Warner and Disney products. Secondly, there is clearly a problem with animation. Disney animation fails with enviable regularity. We might think that the spreading of streaming platforms has taken home viewing to a new level. And in terms of DVD sales, cartoons have always topped the annual charts. But for some reason, it's only Disney Studios that taking the hit. Cause the second Minions are doing great, 940 million in box office kind of hints at it, despite 3 years of postponed premieres. So the audience is ready to go to a movie theater, but not ready to go to a Disney movie. Maybe it's not audience's fault. And Warner Brothers decided to bury 2 of their franchises this year. They are still in the epic reboot of the DC universe. And the flop of Black Adam significantly helped them, although Dwayne Johnson opposes such statements. But Dwayne's situation is understandable. Just 3 or 4 years ago, he was the biggest star in Hollywood with $25 million salaries, and now he has had 2 massive flops in a row and a huge success on streaming in quotes. And the second franchise that failed this year was Harry Potter, more specifically the spin-off about Fantastic Beasts. Now they are thinking what to do next and who to blame for the flop of Dumbledore's secrets. Anyways, in the first part, most of the failed movies had an average budget. Today we are going to talk about $200 million blockbusters, which were only blockbusters on paper. In 2016, the first Fantastic Beasts did well at the box office, grossing $814 million. Audience ratings were good too. With such success, Warner Studios immediately announced plans for 5 incredible films that are sure to shock everyone at the box office. And in 2018, the sequel arrived in theaters, which should already have started to shock everyone up in the movie. Johnny Depp showed up, and the production budget went up to $200 million. And the shock didn't come out the way it was supposed to. Audience ratings plummeted, and the box office numbers did the same after them. The Crimes of Grindelwald grossed $654 million at the worldwide box office. Now a lot of people are mad at Warner Studios for dropping Johnny Depp from the third film. But if you look at the dropped ratings for the second movie and pay attention to what audience wrote in 2018, you'll see that Colin Farrell's replacement with Johnny Depp didn't please majority. Most of comparisons were in Farrell's favor. And this whole situation with Johnny and his bet seems to even play in the studio's favor. Depp started a protracted court battle with Amber Heard, who accused him of all deadly sins. The actor was immediately cancelled and removed from all the films he was signed to. Now the trials are over, and it turns out that almost all the sins that Amber pinned at Johnny are a bit made up. But Johnny has already lost his role in a third Fantastic Beasts, and that cannot be changed. Depp ended up being replaced by Max Mikkelsen. Because of this situation, the start of the filming was delayed and didn't start until the beginning of 2020, just in time for the start of COVID, so the filming had to be stopped. After a while, filming resumed only to be stopped again. Someone on the crew caught the virus and immediately infected everyone around him. So people were sent home again. It is generally believed that the original budget for the film was supposed to be $170 million. But thanks to unlucky circumstances, the film cost the same $200 as the sequel. It arrived to theaters in April 2022 and grossed only $95 million at the domestic box office, compared to $234 million for the first film and $159 for the second. The world box office gave The Secrets of Dumbledore another $310 million, which brought the project's total box office to $405 million, taking into the account the spendings of the studio for the deduction from the box office to cinemas and for marketing. It is written that Warner went into the deficit of $150 million. All the talk about 5 movies immediately vanished. But the studio hasn't officially announced the cancellation yet. However, there are already talks about the return of the Harry Potter series to the big screens. Right now, Warner is not in his best shape because of the merge with Discovery, so it is hard to make any predictions just yet. and right now we don't have any official information about the series. The funny point about the flop of this film is that there is a whole list of explanations, and you can pick the one you like the most. Some people say that it was the disgusting second part which scared the audience away. Some people say the studio was wrong to remove Depp from the film, and the announced boycott of the film from the audience worked. But others are sure that the boycott that worked was the one towards the statement of the writer Joanne Rowling, who refused to consider transgender people as women, which also led to the demand to boycott the third Beasts. Maybe the whole cluster of factors worked. Seems like all the circumstances were against that movie. Disney is having a real drama with the animation divisions this year. Yeah, there are some success on the streaming of course, but so far those successes have resulted in $1.5 billion loss to Disney Plus streaming service. But the studio believes that in couple of years they'll be back, because there will be more success, and this success will be even more successful. The first movie to go down the drain at the beginning of this year was the cartoon Turning Red, but it has an excuse. Disney at the last moment decided to release it on their streaming service at the same time as the premiere in cinemas worldwide. Turning Red wasn't even released at the domestic cinemas. This situation caused a violent protest at the animation studio and cries that Disney is killing Pixar. The world box office gave the cartoon only 20 million on a budget of 175. And on streaming it was an unbelievable success. For 2 weeks after its release, Turning Red had the best viewing figures of any projects on any streaming service. But with a total worldwide box office of 20 million, it's on the list of the biggest flops in history. But of course there is an excuse related to streaming. And the next project, Buzz Lightyear, doesn't have such kind of excuse. Buzz Lightyear cost $200 million. It's a spin-off of Disney's successful Toy Story series. So at the time the project was announced, it was 100% success. All the news that the spin-off wasn't going to be direct appeared later, and there would be nothing left from the original Toy Story, which put 100% success at risk. Lightyear became the first Disney cartoon in 3 years that wasn't sent to streaming at the same time as its theatrical release. And although no one predicted any big box office immediately for the cartoon, a couple of months before release, another problem came up. Cartoon had a same-sex kiss, which led to it being banned in many countries, and brought a lot of noise which didn't do Lightyear any good. Lightyear only grossed 226 million on the worldwide box office on a budget of 200, and also became one of the worst performing animated films in Hollywood history. It is believed that it wasn't so much the lack of connection to the Toy Story or progressive insertion that sunk the cartoon, but its overall quality. Buzz Lightyear is as average cartoon as possible, and other factors only slightly increase its failure. But the animation flops did not end with Lightyear. At the end of the year, another expensive animated film, Strange World from Disney Studios, rolled into the box office. Its budget has not been officially confirmed, but it is approximately $140–180 million. This project was problematic in production and has changed a lot over the course of the work. So 140 might be the original budget, and it's 180 with the revisions. The situation here is even worse than with Lightyear. At least Lightyear had some kind of interest from the audience. But A Strange World was called a guaranteed failure several months before its release. No one was interested in this project. Similarly to Lightyear, a couple of months before the launch, the news about one of the main characters were announced, who turned out to be gay, followed by the news of cancellation in a number of countries. But as noted, the cartoon was buried long before the news, so it's hard to say what impact they had. As in the case of the Lightyear, the main problem is the poor quality of the Strange World. The animation project is still in theaters in several countries. On a budget of 140 or 180 million, it grossed $61 million. With its box office almost finished, the extra 5–6 million that Strange World can still make will not help him. And along with Turning Red, It is one of the top historical animated fiascos, and it also becomes one of the major flops of 2022. If we take into account the nuance with the simultaneous streaming release of Turning Red and take the budget of 180 million, then The Strange World may be the biggest loss of its year for the studio. Black Adam is a weird movie. Dwayne Johnson was interested in character for many years, and he signed up for the leading role in 2015. So it has been 8 years between the moment he signed the contract and the release of the film in the theaters. When Dwayne came on the project, he was at the peak of his form. But the movie came out when he was just Dwayne Johnson. And although one post in his social media still cost millions of dollars, perhaps the previous flop with the Jungles and the current one with Black Adam will seriously change the hierarchy. If we didn't have streaming, it would have happened already. But right now the actor has the opportunity to still be star. Black Adam as a whole is a problematic project. Its script has been rewritten so many times, it's not clear which one they choose to work on. Probably the very first one. Otherwise, it's impossible to understand what they've been doing with the script for so many years when you look at the result. When they finally finished the magnificent script, they scheduled the filming for 2020. And of course they couldn't start filming. So it was postponed until the beginning of 2021, and the movie was supposed to be released in the summer of 2022. But a couple of months after filming was finished, the film suddenly needed more filming. But it didn't take long. So no one wrote about any big problems. But in 2022, the premiere of the film was suddenly postponed and even needed a reshooting, which started a wave of rumors about the bad quality of the product. It was officially reported that Black Adam moved from July to October because of the titanic works on the film's visual effects, as it was stated by the producer of the film. And the fact that the movie went to reshoots for the second time, it was just to shoot a new sunrise. It turned out that the old one was shown from the wrong side. After the new reshoots, many insiders reported that the test screening was way better. And if it had been previously compared to the test screenings of Batgirl, then after the big reshoots, the movie seemed okay. And Dwayne Johnson himself was present at the test screenings and even recorded a video. Someone may remember how much criticism Tom Cruise was subjected to for such tricks on test screenings on Mission Impossible 2, which the poor viewers Yevru after the movie was released in cinemas was blamed on. The audience saw Tom and forgot about the movie. They were asking for autographs, took pictures with the star and gave the film the highest marks, which convinced the studio that everything was fine with the film. Now Johnson did a similar twist, and that was the time when Dwayne starts saying that he's the master of the universe now. He even brought back Henry Cavill, who quickly made cameos for Black Adam and The Flash. So the noise was so loud that Dwayne really seemed to have climbed to the top of the world. But in October 2022, Black Adam came to the movie theaters, where it grossed a whole 391 million on a budget of 200. And the top didn't seem so fun now. Dwayne was trying to say that movie was doing great, for which, as jealous people assure, even ordered a large article on a reputable resource, where Black Adam's failure was dismissed and a success was claimed, which the movie is bound to have because of the streaming success. Dwayne was referring to this data, claiming that Black Adam's marketing was only $80 million. But for some reason the studio thought otherwise, and James Gunn was appointed as a Master of the Universe, who promptly cancelled the third Wonder Woman, a second Black Adam and the newly returned Henry Cavill. And then the word started to get out that Black Adam's budget was actually 190 million before the big reshoots, and after that it hit 260. And even if we take just 80 million on marketing that Dwayne insisted on, that's total budget of $340 million, which could have been recouped at best at around 700 million at the box office. It's a shame we won't find out what the DC universe could have been at Black Adam's box office of 800 or 900 million. maybe no one would have been cancelled, and James Gunn wouldn't have been named Hell's Helm of the universe. But what we have is The Black Adam was one of the major failures of the year, if not the most major. Morbius was only saved from a major flop by a rather modest budget for a comic book. According to one source it's 75 million, according to another it's 83. The budget is often questioned there, as the film had several lengthy reshoots at once, but officially it's 75 million. But various harmful rumors say it's between 100 and 110. Morbius's first shoot was in 2019. It went for its first reshoots in the beginning of 2020 and fell under COVID-related restrictions. But the creators still managed to work for about a month. It was set to premiere in early 2021. On the first test screenings, the Morbius has impressed everyone so much that it got to another reshoots, which took place in early 2021. The movie was moved to the summer of 2021 and then to the fall, where it moved again to the spring of 2022, and then finally it moved to January of the same year 2022. So they wanted to start it earlier. But when No Way Home, released in December of 2021, began to collect a great box office in January of 2022, the studio Sony moved Morbius back to April. The film wasn't predicted to do well. Everyone was expecting a box office failure. The only question was the scale of its failure. And surprisingly, the film did very well compared to the predictions, which made it a relatively small failure. With an official budget of 75 million, the film grossed 167 at the worldwide box office. The studio losses here depend on the advertising costs, which weren't that much. But it is enough to spend 10 or 15 million on advertising for the film to be in deficit. If it's 50 million or more, it's a serious loss. Morbius is also known for its meme status. After its release, audience thought the movie was so awful that different parts of it were mocked. At some point, the mockery became so widespread that Sony decided on a curious move. They tried to monetize the memes. And even though the film had already finished running in cinemas, the studio gave Morbius thousands of screens over the summer and released it again in the US box office. I mean, you would know that being popular online doesn't automatically mean being popular offline, but most importantly, the monetization of memes is dangerous. Morbius grossed as much as 500,000 at a rerun. It probably cost a lot more than that to release on 1000 screens. Amsterdam is another big flop of this year. It had a budget of whopping $80 million. There is an explanation for this expense. But there is no explanation as to why this movie wasn't cancelled because of problems that arose before it was even made. First, Michael B. Jordan ran away from the movie. He was replaced by Denzel Washington's son, who is considered to be a big talent. Then came the COVID restrictions, and filming in a cheap Boston had to be cancelled, because the actors didn't want to go to suffer through restrictions in a village like that. That sounds funny, but that's the official version of moving filming to LA, at the request of the cast. Thanks to the costs associated with the move and a much more expensive city for filming, the budget went from estimated 45–50 million to 80. Perhaps it is one of those situations where actors get paid whether the film was made or not. So the studio didn't cancel Amsterdam, but there is no official statement on anything like that. So there might be some powerful drugs involved as usual. There weren't any particular problems on the set, and it had already started in post-production. But the test screenings were so bad the audience started jumping out of the windows. But there were no changes to the movie. Which is why so much of the film's failure is blamed on Disney, which immediately spat on the movie and cut advertising costs to a minimum. And to make matters worse, Amsterdam was moved forward by a month, cutting back on their already small advertising campaign. It was supposed to come out in November, but Disney decided to spare their second Black Panther even of such competitor. So the movie came out in October. And Amsterdam only managed to gross 14 million at home and 60 million in the rest of the world. The previous collaborations of Christian Bale and director David O. Russell in the movies The Fighter and American Hustle were excellent at the box office, but here it wasn't good. And Margot Robbie was especially lucky. Another movie of hers is out now, Babylon, which also has budget of 80 million, 78 to be exact. Early indications are that Babylon is going to be another massive flop of this year. The film grossed $3.5 million in its first week. With a start like this, it will be almost impossible to escape. There are unique cases like The Greatest Showman, which came out the same days 5 years ago. And after the opening weekend was expected to be a flop. But from the following weekend, the film suddenly began to collect more money and ended up being a hit. But this kind of things happen once every few years, and it's doubtful that it will succeed at Babylon. It's more likely to be the box office equivalent of Amsterdam. And the big flop was director George Miller's new film 3000 Years of Longing. The film was mostly sponsored by independent investors, so it didn't hurt any studios in its production. It cost 60 million and only grossed 19. There is no telling what such a failure could have done to the career of director George Miller, because while 3000 Years of Longing was getting to the big screens, he managed to make a prequel to the film Mad Max Fury Road. But it's not due until 2024. There is a lot of post-production work that needs to be done. So nothing will happen to Miller before the premiere of Furiosa. But Idris Elba wasn't that lucky this year. Another film starring him, The Beast, had a bad show at the box office. But it's in a better situation. 36 million budget and a 56 at the box office. We can also mention the failure of the film The Woman King, with a budget of 50 million and a box office of 92 million. But in its case, most likely the release on various streaming services will earn some money. But the war movie Devotion is not that lucky. It is also an independent film with budget of 90 million, and it has only returned 19. But maybe the movie will get a few crumbs back. But there is still no escaping from the big failure. And Steven Spielberg's Fabelmans, which cost 40 million and has only grossed 10 million, has obviously failed completely. But it's Steven Spielberg's movie about Steven Spielberg's youth, and he made it with his studio money. So it's like Steven wanted to make a movie about himself, and he did. And the main offense may rather come from the fact that one of the most important and famous directors in Hollywood was completely uninteresting for American viewers. I guess those are all the movie flops of 2022 that we can pay attention to. The rest are too small to be highlighted. Thanks for your attention, stay tuned.